Hello, everyone. Welcome to the four C's, engaging students through the four C's. Um, my name is Eric Wade, an MLTI ambassador. Let's get started. So, basically, what we're going to do today is what are the four C's? Look at examples of what they look like in kind of the core classes, and then how you can integrate the four C's into your classroom. So, if you're unfamiliar with what the four C's are, as far as engagement goes, basically here's kind of the kind of down and dirty version of this. So, first C is communication. The idea here is that we all know communication, but being able to convey ideas quickly and clearly uh, is kind of the focus here, but to an authentic audience, but also in text and in real life. The idea of the four C's is that these are skills that students would need to be successful, in jobs that don't exist yet or careers that they haven't even considered being a part of yet. So as far as communication goes, not only are they working on being able to talk to people like face to face, but also in through mediums that don't have any tone, like email and text. How do you communicate clearly so that your message is clear, concise, and to the point, and that that there isn't any confusion on the reader's part. The other C, the next C, is creativity. So it's the idea of thinking outside the box. So you're looking at a problem from multiple perspectives to kind of solve that problem, and we'll get to kind of how this whole thing kind of begins in a few minutes. But you're starting kids off with a big idea, with a big question, with a big idea or a big problem that they need to solve, and you're looking at how can you creatively solve that problem. What are the pieces you can do? But it allows students to work, focus on what they're strong in. So if they're strong, in art, or they're stronger in math, or stronger in science, or they're strong problem solvers, they can kind of play to their strengths. But one of the things I really appreciate about the idea of creativity is that it allows students to fail in a safe environment. This is, it's an iterative process, the idea of creativity. So this will, involving or kind of integrating creativity into your classroom allows students to fail and then not be catastrophic. So they learn to deal with that, but also learn that when you're not successful at something, you change it until you try it again and see if you're successful, and change it and try it again and see if you can be successful with it. It's that idea of growth mindset, or kind of that never quit attitude. But failure is an important thing that we kind of skip over a lot in classrooms. So this allows students to be able to do that and learn from their mistakes in a safe place. The next C is collaboration. So working together to achieve a common goal. The idea of working in teams should be authentic, but it also helps them to communicate with each other, pitch ideas, decide on solutions. It allows students to really work together, either through when they have individual jobs, or they can assign their own positions, or they can kind of just fall into how things work. Really, it all depends on the protocols that you want to use for how your teams work and collaborate in class. Last C is critical thinking. So researching, using data to solve a problem, to work through a problem. It's very important, the idea of critical thinking, separating fact from opinion, but also verifying the information that they're working with is accurate, which is a very important skill for students to be successful going forward. But those are the four C's kind of separately, and you can absolutely put in integrate into your classroom collaboration. You probably already are doing one of these things or two of these things already. I'm sure you're giving students the opportunity to be creative, or to think critically, or to communicate, or to collaborate. You're probably already doing these things, but the idea of the four C's that really kind of makes this different is that it's best when they're all done together, right? And not at the same time, but like in in a unit or in a lesson. Even if you want to get down to a granular level, you can go as far as having all four of these C's be part of an individual lesson. So they absolutely cross with each other. So I'm sure you've already kind of seen that collaboration requires communication, right? It requires people to ask clarifying questions and push people's thinking. Collaboration requires creativity in terms of finding solutions as a group. Creativity needs to have critical thinking. To be able to solve that problem, whatever that problem might be. Critical thinking relies collaboration to be able to either divide and conquer or to come up with initial ideas on how to solve a problem. Um, you know, Creativity inspires problem solving. It's a really important idea that just because you're critically thinking about something doesn't mean that the solution can't come in a creative way. All the collaboration kind of pushing each other to think about a problem from a different solution or from a different angle. In communication, obviously, you have to share those creative ideas with others so that they understand what you're talking about inside your group. Collaborating with others and sharing the solution to your problems requires that communication to be able to be clear and concise so that whether you're talking to a person or you're sending them a message, they understand your point of view. So that's the basics of the 4 C's. The idea is that you want whenever possible, if you can put them all together, that's how they work best. But if it doesn't, if you can't, if your lesson or whatever you're working on, really only two fit, and forcing the other two doesn't make a lot of sense. So, you very well may be in a situation where you're hitting collaboration and communication on something because they're working as in a group to do a project of some sort, but there may not be a lot of critical thinking, or that might not be the focus of it. And that's fantastic. It works best when they're all put together, but as long as students are practicing these skills individually or pairs or triads, then that's fantastic. They're still working on those 21st century skills. So let's take a minute and look at some examples of the 4 C's. The first one is a math idea. So you have your critical thinking is you're trying to prove the Pythagorean theorem. That requires you to look at data, requires you to think critically about something. Your collaborations are students working together to understand. That might be part of it because the proof for the Pythagorean theorem isn't hard, but it is definitely a challenge for some people. Or it could be communicating, right? They're collaborating together to be able to communicate their findings afterwards, working in a small group or whatever. Creativity is students have the creative freedom to design how they want to present. To show everybody else how their proof works. One of the things that I've always found as a teacher is that I might explain it one way and a student explains it a very different way, but neither one of us is wrong. We're both right in our explanations, but it really hits another student better, right? Like that student explanation is like, oh yeah, I totally get that. I see how you're saying it, and I was confused by where what the teacher was saying. And then communication is students record their proof for other students to use for reference. So you have that available as in a toolbox or something for other students to be able to use, or you have every year you have students create their proofs and communicate that out to the world and post it online for parents to see, or you actually use it as a reference for students to work on after school in case they've forgotten and they're working on their homework. So that's one example. Another example, science-wise, can you build a vehicle that moves only using Newton's third law is the critical thinking piece of that. So you have to really kind of work with that creativity to be able to create that vehicle and understand how it would use Newton's third law to move. Creating that vehicle is an iterative process, meaning that you're going to be failing and having to come back and fix or try something different and then go back and try it again. If it doesn't work, you go back again. Collaboration, the students working together to create a plan, the thinking about how they want to solve this problem as a group, pushing each other's thinkings, and then at the end communicating how their design and especially how they met the kind of the standard or the guiding question, the big idea, that critical thinking piece is how did it move only using Newton's third law. So that's science. For like a reading English language arts perspective, how does society value impact a person's actions? I kind of came at this from the angle of To Kill a Mockingbird, which I one of my favorite books, and one I know that middle schools tend to read from time to time, or early high school. So there's your big question. You're going to need lots of evidence to support yourself on this, which comes as part of the critical thinking. Either students work together to edit scripts, if they're going to do some sort of podcast, or maybe they're going to do a play, or they're going to have some sort of way of communicating their answers to this question. Again, using the device, the evidence, sorry. And it might be that the collaboration of the students are working together on this. Whether it might be a podcast or a or some sort of dramatic representation of their answer, or however you set it up. Really, it's kind of up to you. But also gives students creativity to be able to, how they go about communicating this can lead to all sorts of different creative ways, whether it's a podcast, cover art, or if it's some sort of way on, creating some dramatic effect or something like that. They give students an opportunity to use their creativity. And again, this is a long-term project, right? Like, this is a very straightforward question, but this comes as, for instance, as assessment. It might be at the end of it where you're really hitting these 4 C's all in one assignment or one assessment or one project, or however you want to view it. Last one is like a social studies reference, where you're convincing an audience to visit a country of your choice. That's the kind of critical thinking piece. So you got to go in there and really think about what it is exactly that you want your kind of convince people that yours is the places they should go. So you're really getting in there and doing your research and looking at data. The collaboration piece might go in with the critical thinking, right? Students work with the Department of Tourism in different countries to understand better what it is that that country can offer. The communication and the creativity can go together in this, where they're using some sort of multimedia to make their point, and that allows that creativity to be kind of on display as well. So I apologize if you're a phys ed or health or art or anything like that. I apologize that I didn't do examples for all the different subjects that might be in a school, but I tried to hit the kind of big major 4 just to kind of demonstrate what this could look like in a lesson. Obviously, there's significant or there's many ways that you can use these in your subject areas. Then you can follow a similar kind of idea as this. So let's look at the integration of these. How can you actually start using this in your class? So first one is you want to start with your standard, right? Like, let's take a look at what it is exactly that you're doing. And this is a big mind changer for me when I started really thinking about inquiry, is this idea of, instead of looking at teaching students content, we're teaching students skills, and the content just gives the skill the context that it needs for students to be able to practice that skill. We're teaching students how to communicate. We're teaching them how to creatively think and how to do good critical thinking, right? We're teaching them how to collaborate. Those are obviously pieces of it, but also you're thinking, like, what is the skill that you're trying to teach? Is it using evidence? Is it creating a model, right? Like, what is it exactly? What skill are you trying to teach? And then what's the context that you're going to do that? That's where the content comes into this. So look at your standard, but don't just look at the standard as I need to teach this content to somebody, right? Think about it bigger. What are the skills that I can teach using this content? And maybe it is the C's, the 4 C's that you're kind of focusing on for your skill. Or maybe it's map reading, right? It could be a lot of different things. And I always start when I do any sort of, anything that has to do with the 4 C's, and basically anything that when I teach, I always use a guiding question at the very beginning. Again, focusing on skill development. Make sure it's nice and broad, allows room for the 4 C's or maybe 2 C's if it fits whatever you're trying to do. Again, like I said, don't try to force it. But again, the content is the context, right? You're looking at the skill development, not just imparting information to people. Especially in this day and age, right? Like, I can Google on my phone the answer to a question and get information. But if I don't know what to do with that information, then what good is it, right? Students have their little computers in their pockets, or they're probably staring at one, in your classroom. Why, the content is obviously important to be able to understand that. But as far as memorizing things, that's it's kind of old school way of looking at it. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but If I need to know the atomic mass of oxygen, I just Google it. I don't need to memorize it anymore. So the other way to think about this is you've got your guiding questions, you get your standards, but then start from the backwards or start from the end and backwards plan your way through. If you're unfamiliar with backwards planning, if this is kind of the first time you've ever heard of it, then this backwards plan word right here is a link that will take you to Grant Wiggins and Jay McTeague, who are kind of the pioneers around backwards planning. It'll take you to a website that has some great videos and some great explanations on how to backwards plan, like the process of it. But basically the idea is you start with the standard and the assessment, and then you build out backwards. So you start with the assessment or you start with the end, and then you work your way back to the beginning and design activities for students to do that kind of bring them to that assessment. So if you start from the end and you're building your assessment and it includes some sort of communication, for instance, right, you're already hitting that C. So as you build out, you can kind of keep in mind those other three C's, or maybe communication kind of flows through the entire thing. And how can you how can you put in there some creativity? How can you apply the skill that you want students to learn, right? Like we just talked about the idea that it's a skill instead of a content, and that content is the context. So perhaps it is, here's this skill I want you to do, and your assessment is on an application of that skill in a new way, right? That's a creative way of thinking about a skill of some sort. But as you backwards plan, you can kind of make all of these, scaffold all of this into your assessment at the end, which is the idea anyway. So maybe your assessment has parts of the 4 C's in it, or maybe the assessment is kind of a culmination of using the 4 C's throughout the activities that were prior to that assessment. It's really up to you, right? You get to decide all of these things. The last one, kind of the last idea here in terms of integration of this, is to think across the curriculum. I've been a science teacher for 20 years or so, and one of the things that I've kind of worked through my career is how can I include other subject skills that I may not have into my science class, right? So for instance, science has cross-cutting concepts. If you're unfamiliar with cross-cutting concepts, they're the idea of building models and reading informational texts, things like that, cause and effect. So I use those in my science classes all the time, but that's also has some cross to ELA and social studies. So thinking across the curriculum and understanding other folks' standards is a great way to include your 4 C's into your planning. Using evidence is a huge piece of science, but it's also a huge piece in writing and a huge piece of social studies and a big part of math. You may not think of showing your work as evidence, but that's basically what it is. You're showing your thinking. It's evidence of your thinking. So math has data analysis, which fits into all sorts of different places. ELA has comprehending informational text, which is a huge part of social studies and science. Social studies has analyzing primary sources. Again, a huge piece of social studies, science, and even math. Understanding these things is important, and those are all skills, right? Using evidence to support a claim is a skill. Understanding data and how to analyze it is a skill. Comprehending informational text is a skill. So using the skills that you might find in other classrooms and other subjects specifically, you can use those to be part of the 4 C's and include them throughout your unit as you go along. So that's it. That's basically it. It's really not a super hard idea to understand. It is more of a challenge to integrate. So if you're if you're stuck and you would like to kind of talk about your thinking or kind of think it out loud with me, I'd happily work with you on that, on how to kind of integrate that in. And I think it's important to keep in mind that it's not an all or nothing, right? As I've mentioned a couple of times, like in the end, it works best when all four are used, either in a lesson or in a unit or an assignment or whatever. But in the end, if you're just starting off, that's a big ask. So start with just working on adding communication, right? Start with just a little bit of collaboration, or look at what you're already doing and say, oh, look, I'm already collaborating, or look, I'm already having students communicate their learning to me in this way. Maybe I can add in some creativity to this, or maybe you're doing some creative work with students. Students are thinking creatively, they're thinking outside the box, or they're doing critical thinking, and you can add the communication part after it. So it's not an all or nothing, right? Like I said, it works best when they're all together. But again, you start slow, please. Absolutely start slow. Start where you're comfortable. Any little bit of this is fantastic for students thinking as far as problem solving, and moving forward in their careers and in their schooling. So, if you're interested in a contact hour, if you click here, this will take you to a quick Google form. That Google form just has a couple of questions on it. Get 3 out of the 4 questions correct, and I'll send you a link with the contact hour on it. If you're not interested in the contact hour, then don't click that link. But like I said before, I'm happy to help you think about this, or to kind of be just somebody to listen as you talk your thoughts out loud. I'll come to you. We can talk in person, or if you're more comfortable on the Zoom, I can send you a Zoom link. So. Thank you very much for spending some time with me, and I'll talk to you later. Have a great day.